Hello and welcome to another episode of Who Knew in the Moment, the podcast. I'm your host, Phil Friedrich, and today I am honored to have Amberlys with me. Amberlys has a phenomenal story of true grit and grace, which she now has a podcast on. She's a best-selling author, a speaker, and a hope dealer. And something that I've realized as I've gotten to know about her story is that it's about perception and how we view the events that happen in our lives and how we can turn those into our good. So Amberlys, thanks so much for being on today.
Oh, thank you for having me. We were having so much fun before we hit record, and so I just appreciate you having me on your show. I'm excited to be here.
You bet. So to kick off your story and get started, you mentioned that growing up as a young girl, you had to learn the lesson of cowgirling up at a very young age. So talk a little bit about those early informative years of your life.
Yeah, I grew up in Texas, and it's funny because I moved when I was 18 to California, and I lived there for 31 years, and we just moved back to Texas, and it's been a little bit different transition. I didn't realize that I would start to remember things that I was brought up with, like cowgirl up. And, whenever I was going through a difficult situation or any kind of a challenge, it was always like, suck it up, buttercup, and I'm like, yeah, suck it up gets you so far, I learned to suck it up. And I would say, I love your whole concept of what you share, because it does give everybody listening such a different perspective. And sometimes when you are going through such a hard time in your life and you think that there is no way there can be any kind of a blessing in this situation, there's always a gift or a blessing or a lesson or all of those things. And I would say, as a young girl, one of the biggest and first lessons that I learned was I was sexually abused by my stepfather, and it got so bad. And he told, and I don't mean to get so heavy when we first start this conversation, but it just came to mind, like the biggest thing that happened as a kid that was really scary and filled with shame and challenging. He told me that he would kill my mom if I told anyone. And as a little kid, I was 8 years old. I thought he would. And a few years later, I was like, I can't take this I was so scared that I went to my dad and I told my dad, I said, Dad, you can't tell anybody, but this is what's going on. And he didn't tell anybody, and he didn't do anything. And that, at one point, I felt like, oh, wow, I'm not worthy of even being protected. And I mean, look, my dad and I have healed from that. We are great friends now. We go for a walk every week together now, especially now that I just moved back. We can actually do that. But that taught me in that moment. At first, I feel like, oh, wow, I'm not worthy. But the next time my stepdad came into my bedroom, I fought him off as hard as I could. I mean, I kicked and I pulled his hair and I punched him as hard as I could. And the look on his face, and I realized that in that moment that it was up to me to take care of myself, that I was going to I had to show up for myself. And I think that we all have to be our own hero. And that really taught me a lot. And it taught me that if I wanted something done, I better go after it and go after it full force, which carried over into every aspect of my life. I've learned a lot of other lessons since then. But, I think growing up too, we didn't have a lot of money, and I started working when I was 13. And, while all of my other friends had cars that their parents bought them and stuff, it was like I had to get another job just to try to save up the money to buy a car. And I was able to finally get enough money to put a down payment down. And back then, it felt like such a struggle as a kid to be going to school and work in 2 different jobs. But then it taught me grit, and it taught me to appreciate the things. It taught me to appreciate that little Suzuki Samurai that I bought, and I washed it every week, and I was so proud of that car. And so it's things like that they feel really difficult in that situation, but they teach you life lessons. And then I'll share one more. Growing up was I
Yeah.
was in dance, I was in track, I was an athlete, and that was really my outlet for
Yeah.
expressing myself, and running from shame from sexual abuse. I didn't really deal with it
Mm.
too much. I ran from it. And how I overcame that was I became an overachiever. I made straight
Mm.
A's. I was on honor roll. I was Miss Greenville High School. I mean, you name it. I was like, I'm going to do it. And
Yeah.
in dance, my teacher was really hard on me. And at the time I thought, gosh, maybe, maybe she just doesn't like me. And what it was is she liked me a lot. She believed
Mm.
in me and she saw what I was capable of. And so she saw my potential. And so she pushed me harder and she taught me some of the biggest life lessons I've ever learned. And one of them was, so I went through a teacher training program with her and she would say, I don't care if you just lost your dog or you lost your best friend. I don't care if your dog died. When that class starts, you put the needle on the record and you turn around with a smile on your face. And I'm dating myself right
Yeah.
now about putting the needle on the record, but that's how it used to be. Like, needle on the
Yeah.
record, turn around and you teach the class. And it taught
Yeah.
me to suit up and show up, like it doesn't, if you've got to get a job done and you show up and you work hard and you do your best no matter what. And so I just got to see my dance teacher the other day for the first time. And I was like crying and hugging her and telling her that has been my greatest mentor. But then moving to California, having a successful dance career, and then being in the fitness industry, when I had a devastating near-death accident is when I really started to have to dig deep to learn the lessons,
Yeah.
to find the blessings. And once I've been able to climb out of that darkness and despair, that's what I'm passionate about sharing with others is if you're stuck or if you're depressed or if you're anxious or if you were like me and thinking of you don't want to live anymore, there are ways to get through that. There are things that you can do to climb out of that darkness.
There is a lot to unpack in what you just shared in those few minutes there, and I want to kind of walk through those. So, one, you mentioned it. There's having that, I don't know, we'll just call it, kindness or empathy about, hey, you're going through something tough in your life, and I want to respect that. But at the same token, you still have a job to get done, or you still have something that you need to do. So when you're in those younger years, those teenage years, I think it's a lot harder to understand that. Gosh, don't you understand? Like, this is going on in my life. Why are you making me still show up? But as you get older, you realize that, yeah, bad things happen in your life, but the next day there's still a job to be done, whether that's being a spouse, being a parent, showing up to work and getting the job done. Talk about that for you and just some of the lessons learned at that young age that helped throughout your life.
Well, I think that, it taught me resilience. It taught me grit. It taught me my work ethic that I still have today. And
Yeah.
it taught me to be on time as a form of respect for others. And if something's important, and if it's important enough, you will find the time and you will get there and you will do it. But if it's not, then you'll find an excuse. And a good example of that
Yeah.
I learned the hard way was so I was in the dance company and we had to be at the studio. You did not dare be late. Well, I come
Yeah.
waltzing in the studio and I had missed the very first rehearsal for this number that we were doing. We were doing this can, and I guess I missed it somehow. I thought, like, pay attention to detail. I missed this, that it started at like 4 and I showed up at 5. And my dance teacher cut me. She was like, "No, you're out of the number. You're late. You're out. Your understudy's doing it now." And so I
Wow.
was like, "Wow, like I don't ever want to be late." So now I show up early, even if, we were talking before we started recording, and I'm doing a lot of traveling for speaking events. Well, I get there, and this is just how I am. I get there early. If I'm speaking on the afternoon, I get there the night before, make sure I get enough sleep. I'm settled in. I go check out the stage. I ask the organizer, what can I do to help you? What time do you need me to be there? Do you want me to do a run through? Like, I am there early because it's a form of respect. And it shows that you care. And so that's one of the lessons that I really learned when I thought, God, my dance teacher is so harsh. Well, that was a really good lesson that she taught me.
Yeah, that's so good. Now, the other piece was, and you talked about the traumatic event of sexual abuse and growing up. How did that impact your relationships as you really started to get older, and maybe before you started to do the work of working through those experiences?
Well, that is such a good question because it does impact everything you do, whether you realize it or not. Like, you can tell yourself that you have healed and you forgot about it and it's done, but your nervous system, your body remembers. And I didn't realize until, I'll just give you an example. Like, I still to this day, I'm in my house. It's safe. My husband's a good guy. My daughter's here. My other daughter's at school. I will still go to the bathroom here in the house and lock the door. Where does that come from? For years, I would not be seen in a bathing suit. When I was a dancer, I always wore baggy clothes to class, and I would put my costume on to go on stage. When I was at home growing up, I never felt safe. And so I didn't have that many boyfriends. I had one boyfriend that was my true love, and we were together for 6 years. And then we broke up, and I dated my husband. It was a horrible relationship. I really think that going through something like that does and can, if you don't do the healing work, cause you to pick people in your life that don't necessarily treat you right, or with respect, or with kindness or empathy, or are emotionally available for you. And I did not have the best first husband. And I did not realize until we were going through a divorce and I went to therapy. And my therapist, I kind of brushed over the fact that, oh, yeah, and by the way, I was sexually abused. And she goes, whoa, wait a minute. What about that? And 'cause I guess some of the things that I was expressing to her were big red flags. I had no idea. And she goes, you have not healed. You have not done any work. Like, I want you to read this book, and I need you to come back to therapy. And I started really digging deep. It was hard. It was painful to go through, relive some of that. So it did impact relationships of, people I was dating. I was a little more closed off. I was, without realizing it. And I remember my ex-husband had a real problem with, he worked the late shift, and he would get off work sometimes 2, sometimes 4 o'clock in the morning. And he would come home and come in the bedroom to wake me up. And I would wake up like ready to fight, like wake up like I'm a ninja. And it was just my survival, I guess. I don't do that anymore, but I had not done the work to heal. And he would get so mad at me. And I would say, I'm sorry. But he had no understanding, neither did I, of what it was like to live in a house with someone who you never knew if he was going to come in the door or what he was going to do. And so you live in that fight or flight. And so that's where I lived. And so with a lot of therapy, healing, talking it over, I've been able to heal that. But it's interesting because when I wrote my book, True Grit and Grace, in the back cover, so they send you this book, and my husband's reading the back of the book, and he's reading about the book, and it says, survived sexual abuse, blah, blah, blah. He goes, did you know they wrote sexual abuse on the cover, on the back jacket of your book? I was like, yeah, honey, I actually write about it in the book. Maybe you should read the book because I write about it. He's like, you wrote about it? Oh my God. And, my stepmom had said something. My mom had said, well, Amberly, I let my mom and my dad read it before it was published so they could, have any suggestions. And so my mom read it and she said, Amberly, could you please write in there that if I would have known, then I would have done this? And I said, Mom, this isn't a book about woulda, coulda, shoulda. This is a book about this is what happened, and this is how I have learned to thrive despite it.
Well, picking up right there, let's talk a little bit about just the coming to that place where you were comfortable to talk about it, because it sounds like for a long time, whether it was out of fear or just not knowing who to talk to, you didn't talk about it a whole lot. And then to get to a point where, oh my gosh, I'm going to put this on paper, right? I mean, and anyone for all of the history of time will be able to jump in and read about my life experience. Talk about getting to that point of being comfortable to share that. And I mean, I'm guessing part of it's therapeutic for you, but the other part is to help other people that might have had similar stories in their life.
Phil, you ask the best questions. You do.
Well, thank you.
You're awesome. Well, you know what? I think at first it was totally fear, fear for my mom, fear for me, what would happen to me, what would happen to my sister, what would happen to my sister if I didn't say something, what would happen to her if I did, like all the things, the fear. But the worst thing was the shame. Oh my God, the shame is so heavy. They make it feel like it's your fault. You feel dirty. You feel unworthy. You have no confidence. That's how I felt. And so it was so scary to tell my dad. And then when he didn't do anything, I thought, well, what's the use of telling anybody anyway? But I did. My first boyfriend could tell, like, what's up? Something's wrong. What's going on? Like, why are you, as soon as we get to your house and your stepfather comes around, you cringe and he could sense it. He could see how I would physically, I was scared. And so I ended up telling him. And then I told my ex-husband. And what made it worse, those were the only people I had told my grandmother too. But I'd only told those 3 people. No one else knew. And I was going through a horrible divorce. Horrible. I won't get into details, but I will tell you this detail that I've never shared before on a podcast or anything, is he knew he couldn't hurt me in any other way. And so what he did was he called my mother and he told my mom, do you know what your husband did to my wife? And that's how my mom found out about me being sexually abused. And I'm sure some of the listeners are like, well, what happened to him? What happened next? Well, believe it or not, the crazy thing is he never denied it. I thought he would deny it. He didn't deny it. My mom came to California to see me and go to the divorce court with me. So I have so much hurt for her, shame for me. I'm about to go get a divorce. I'm going to be a single mom of a 1-year-old. And my mom got back home and my stepdad had left. He had fled. They didn't know where he was. They would try to find him. They couldn't find him. He ended up living about an hour from me in LA, and he actually died of testicular cancer.
Wow.
Isn't that crazy? But I think I learned, back to your question, to really start to talk about it with therapy, yes. But also when I realized I am not going to let some awful thing that happened control me. That was just a bad experience, and I don't have to walk in shame. I can, and I feel like by the grace of God and by the grace that we give ourselves, we can focus on what we can control and decide to move forward. And when I say decide, it wasn't like it was easy and one day I'm like, and I'm free. There are still things that come up that I'm like, where did that come from? There may be something I need to take a look at. And those are just, those little triggers are just your body saying, hey, can you acknowledge this feeling that you're having so we can deal with it and heal with it? I don't want to just deal. I want to heal. I want to get better. I want to thrive. And so I noticed that when I started to share with other women or in safe places where I felt like I could share. There are so many women and men who have experienced the same thing. They've been sexually abused. There are so many. It happens. Like I don't, 3 and 5. It's crazy. The numbers are
Wow.
crazy. I don't know what the statistics are now, but years ago, that's what it was. And I think that having someone to confide in and to talk to and just hold space for you and doing some therapy and writing is so cathartic. There was a lot that I thought I had healed. When I wrote my book, oh my goodness, I had to stop in the middle of writing it. I was like, ooh, these emotions I really need to take a look at. But I have had more people reach out to me and say thank you for sharing your experience, because it gave me, for the first time, a sense of freedom that I would be able to do the same.
Yeah. That's so powerful, and it will continue to help people. So thank you for doing that. Now, to go a little bit back before the book, so you mentioned in high school you start getting into dance and athletics, and dancing and athletics becomes a very important part of your life, and kickboxing and different sorts of physical activity. Talk about getting ingrained in that and really how you started to make that be a career for you.
Well, I think that, I loved dance. I knew from the time I was little. I mean, I started dancing when I was 3. And I think by
Yeah.
the time I was maybe 9, 10, I knew I was going to, maybe a little older. I knew I wanted to grow up and be a dancer. But then when MTV came out and you
Yeah.
saw the music videos, I was like, wait a minute, you can get paid to dance? Well, then that's what I'm going to do. And people were like,
Yes.
right, good luck. You'll never make it in Hollywood, whatever. Anyway, I worked 4 jobs. I taught dance. I was a lifeguard. I worked at the cookie jar. I cleaned houses. I babysat part-time. Like whatever I could do. I saved up $1,200, packed up my little Suzuki Samurai, moved to LA, and a month later, everybody that was like, "Ugh, you'll never make it. You'll be back." I was dancing on an MC Hammer music video. That was like 1990, 91.
Yeah.
Back in the day. But yeah, I was really in athletics and in kickboxing and Muay Thai, and I have a belt in Krav Maga. And I think one of the reasons that I really loved boxing and Krav Maga is not just because of the cardiovascular and that it makes you stronger, but it makes you more confident. And let me tell you, Krav Maga gives you a type of confidence like you carry with you. You can be walking in a dark alley and people be like, "Ooh, maybe I don't want to mess with her." In fact, I tell you what, Phil, one of the reasons we decided to move to Texas, so we recently moved here in December. My daughter and I got hit by a car. We were on our little razors. We got hit by a car. We went to the hospital. We got out of the hospital the same day. We're doing fine. After that, we're riding our bike, and a homeless person jumps me in front of my daughter, and I screamed to my daughter, "Keep going, keep riding." And I get
Wow.
off my bike and I am up and ready to fight. Like, bring it. You have just messed with the wrong person. I've already been hit by a car twice. Now you're knocking me off my bike to try to take my money. Bring it. They took off running. So I was like, I am so grateful for the boxing and the Muay Thai and the Krav Maga. But I
Yeah.
think one of the reasons I got into it is because, my brother used to beat the crap out of me because I was sexually abused. I was like, screw this. I am going to get
Yeah.
strong. I'm going to take care of myself. I'm going to be able to protect myself. And so it just does carry through. That confidence and moving your body gets those endorphins going. And so it's something that I have always loved. And I can still box, but I can't kickbox anymore because my ankle is fused and my leg is metal from the knee
Yeah.
all the way down into my toes. And I've tried kicking the bag a couple of times, like maybe I'll be able to do it. And it's like, oh, the pain. doesn't work. So I'm like, okay, I'll stick to the boxing. So yeah. I think moving your body moves your mood so much.
That's so true. Now, you've alluded to it twice, so I think a lot of people would hear what we've talked about thus far and say, wow, Amberly has had a really difficult series of events happen in her life. And as you're progressing through your career, things are going well, right? You're in dance world, we're getting in music videos, we're having a successful career in fitness and training. We have sponsorships with Nike. Things are going really well. And one day, you hop on a motorcycle, probably not unlike many other days, but the ending result of that day, significantly different than any other day. So talk a little bit about that event and really where that led to.
Yeah. Yeah. I was coming home from work. It was a holiday weekend. It was actually Memorial Day. And coming home from work, just ran my best time that day with my running partner. And this SUV shoots out of a parking lot, and not just like, oh, let me just go a little slow, like punches it like he's trying to miss traffic and nails me. So I get T-boned and I'm thrown about 30 feet. And I just remember sliding across the asphalt thinking, oh my God, I can't believe. Well, my first thought was, oh shit, can I cuss on here?
Yeah.
And then I was like, please don't let another car hit me. And when I came to a stop, I immediately grabbed my leg because that's where the pain was, and it was just broken into pieces and blood was everywhere. So I only looked down at it once because it was that deformed and my foot was dangling off of my leg. And it seemed like the only thing that was holding it together were my leggings. And I just started screaming. I was screaming the F word thing. And then I'd be like, oh, my Methodist mama would not be too proud of me right now. Then I was like, call 911. Somebody call 911. And the freaky thing was people were not running over to me. They were walking slow, like with a horrified look on their face. So I was like, this must be, I knew it was bad, but it must be really bad. Yeah. Nobody wants to come over. Luckily, I had a guy come over and he saved my life because he made a tourniquet on my leg right away. And when your femoral artery severed, you can bleed out pretty quick. And he saved I could have bled out right there. Talk about being in the right place at the right time. Yes, I was in the wrong place for that SUV, but I was in the right place because there were paramedics that were literally down the street. They were running towards me before they even got the call from 911. And so I got rushed to the hospital. I was pretty much dying on the table. My organs were shutting down. Everything was starting to fail. They couldn't control the pain. It was not going well. And so they put me in induced coma. And when I woke up out of a coma is when I learned that I would have a 1% chance of saving my leg from amputation. And when I heard that, my first thought was, okay, well, then there's still a chance. We got to find a doctor who's willing to take that chance with me. And I felt kind of like that Dumb and Dumber movie, like, so you're saying there's a chance?
Well, yeah, so guy like me, a girl like you, 1 in a million. Love it.
Yes, but 34 surgeries later, they saved my leg. But then I was hit with the news that as a result of the trauma, I was diagnosed with an incurable nerve disease called complex regional pain syndrome. And that really is where the struggle really began, because being an athlete and a dancer, I'd had injuries. I had a broken leg. I'd had a sprained ankle, a torn hammy, like all the things, been sore. I knew how to push through pain. So I was like, okay, this is going to take time. I'm going to heal. I'm going to get better. And every day in between surgeries. So I'd have a surgery, then a day of recovery, then a surgery, then a day of recovery. And it was like I was going to war. And so I would just like do everything I could to eat for nourishment purely like to stay alive. Like I need to nourish my body. You know, I had to watch what I ate because if my blood sugar levels got over 125, they wanted to give me a shot of insulin because if your blood sugar levels are too high, it can cause infection. And I would for sure have to amputate my leg. And the rate or you know, they were so worried that I would have infection. I mean, it was so risky because my leg was just broken into pieces. It was basically like a crumbled cracker on the inside.
Yeah.
And so I would have a surgery, then I would do my best to recover in a surgery. And this went on for, I was in and out of surgery for almost 4 years. So it was a lot of in and out of a wheelchair, up and down off of crutches. I used a walker once and I'm like, screw this walker. This is not my thing. Give me the crutches. But people saw me going into the gym, you know, with my wheelchair. And the look on their faces, because I looked like I had been to war. I'd about 20 pounds. I was about 20 pounds lighter than I am now. And I was scarred up and had, you know, tubes coming out of both arms and crazy. And I was in the gym because I was focusing on what I could do. And I knew that moving my body would it would build my confidence. It would make me feel like I was going in the direction that I wanted to. And I think it really actually allowed me to feel like I had some sort of control over what was going on.
Yeah.
And so I was grasping at anything just to feel better. And so I was in the gym in my wheelchair. I was in the gym the day after surgeries. I bled out across the gym floor one day. And that's when my husband was like, you are crazy. Like, you need to stop this. And that's when I stopped doing personal training. And I was like, okay, this is not serving the way that I could be serving people. What else can I do where I can still impact people in a positive way? And that's when I went and got a life coaching certification and started doing life coaching. And that's when I started getting asked to do talks and decided to write a book. And I mean, but seriously, 5 years ago, I didn't even own a computer. I had no social media. I did not use email really. My business was word of mouth in the beginning. Like in my fitness career for sure was word of mouth. I had, you know, so much work that I had trainers that worked for me that I would refer business to. I would train these trainers and then they would then take on handpicked clients. And so I had a great business. Now, I've completely reinvented myself. And, you know, I remember when I wanted to write a book, I had comments and from people I love too. I think they're like, who do you think you are? You can't write a book. You're the fitness girl. You didn't go to college. Like, what? You write a book. Good luck. And then my husband was like, well, you don't even have a computer. So I hand wrote like 90% of my book in a little spiral book. And then I remember I was trying to ask him to teach me how to do something. I was invited to go speak on this panel for Lorna Jane, and they needed me to send them a picture. Phil, I didn't even know how to send a picture, attach it to an email. And I was like, honey, he was in the garage, and I was like, honey, can you help me? I don't know how to do this. It was a PC computer. And he started yelling, what else do you need? I said, I just started crying. I said, you know what? Screw it. I'm going to go buy my own computer. I went to the Apple store. I got myself an Apple because I heard they were the easiest to work. It is, I think. Yeah. And I typed up my whole manuscript. I got a publisher. I remember telling my husband, well, I got a publisher. And they actually want your book. I'm like, they do. Then I called him up. I'm like, guess what? They want me on the Today Show. How about that? And he goes, well, you're on your own on that. I am not flying to New York. And I was like, okay. And then he called me back a little later and he goes, you know what? I'm sorry. That's really cool. And I said, well, I'm glad you think it's cool because they're going to fly for you to come out too. He goes, yeah, it's really, but it was like all this change because he had been, you know, my caretaker. I was bedridden.
Right.
He thought I was going to die. He literally had to do everything for me and my family. He had to become the breadwinner now. When I was the breadwinner before, he had to take care of me. He had to take care of our teenage daughter and our 2-year-old daughter. So now all of a sudden I heal, I get stronger, I get better. And now I'm getting out there in the world. I'm sure it was a little bit like, whoa, I think he had some post-traumatic stress.
Yeah.
I think I put him through hell.
Yeah, between the both of you, I think you went through it.
Yeah.
Now, as you're talking though, and you're coming out of the surgeries, even during the surgeries, I think, one thing that happens frequently is people ask the question, why me? Right? Like, life was going so well. Like, why the heck did this have to happen to me? I was loving my business. I was loving what I was getting to do. Why me? And your grandpa had an interesting analogy for you about a shovel. So talk a little bit about that in your story and that decision to progress on opposed to getting stuck on the why me.
See, Phil, there you go again, asking the best questions. That's why there's such a high demand to get on your show. People just want to talk to you.
We're just going to hang out and have these conversations. It's tough life, but someone's got to do it, right? The two of us.
Yes. Well, you know what? My grandfather, he was the best man. In fact, I have his little card holder on my desk. But yeah, I think it's normal. I think it's human nature to get into that why me. And I think it is so important to the questions that we ask ourselves. But yeah, my grandfather, he would always say, you got a shovel in your hand. You can lean on it and just pray for a hole, or you can start digging. And it's like, yeah, it's good to pray. I pray every day. I pray several times a day sometimes. I get on my knees and pray a lot of times. But you've got to be willing to do the work. You got to get gritty. And I think that success is really based on, grit, I think. I really think that it takes grit. That's how I have achieved any kind of either small or anything successful in my life that I'm proud of. It's been grit, because I have never been the smartest one. I've never been the most talented one. I've never had the most money. I've never had the most followers, but I can sure work hard. And I think that grit, the formula for it is really, it starts with, it's inspired by your purpose and your vision. It's fueled by your passion, by your belief, by your faith. It's driven by love. It is, strengthened by resilience, and with a little bit of fear of failure. And also, I think, a little bit of, I'm going to prove them wrong. Because I don't know about you, but some of my biggest motivating moments are when somebody tells me I can't do something. I'm like, oh, really? Like, I remember when I was being released from the hospital and this one doctor was like, well, you'll never run again. I was like so excited to go home. And I was like, I can't wait to train clients and I can't wait to go to the beach. And he goes, oh, well, I don't know if you'll ever wear shorts again with scars like that. And I was like, oh, I felt like I'd been kicked in the gut. But then it took me 2 years, but I ran on the beach again, and I was not in shorts. I was in a bikini. So now it took a long time to really embrace my imperfections, my scars, and it's taken a lot of grit. But I think that, if you love something, if you put enough care into something, and if you ask the right questions. So I'll tell you, Phil, I was asking the wrong questions. I was saying, how am I going to get through this? What am I going to do? How am I going to get through this pain? What am I going to do if I can't train clients again? I was all in my head. And then I was in my hospital bed. So I had a hospital bed that was set up in our living room because I couldn't go up and down the stairs. And I hear this little voice from upstairs go, Mama. And I thought, why? Why am I going to get through this? Why am I going to get through this day? And my daughters were my why. My daughters were my why in the beginning. I wanted to see them when I was in ICU. They wouldn't let little kids come in there. So my big why was if I could sit up in my wheelchair, they would roll me out and I'd be able to see my daughter again. My big why was little things like I want to be able to chase after my daughter someday. My big why became I want to be able to train clients again because I love seeing that transformation in people. And so I think when we're in the how and the what, we're in our head, but when we say why, we activate our purpose and we activate that energy and we activate that vision and that human spirit. And the human spirit is powerful beyond measure.
Yeah. Well, it was really interesting. Just as you were even mentioning the questions you were asking yourself, it was all I, right? How am I going to do this? How am I going to get that? How is my business going to impact me? And then all of a sudden you start flipping it and you say, well, who can I help with this, right? How am I going to be able to help others with this? And I heard you mention earlier, a faith aspect, and you say to yourself, how is God going to use this to help other people, right? And opposed to it being a me-focused question, it becomes an others-focused question. I think there's something to be said about doing something for yourself, but I also think there's a big catalyst of if what I can do can help others, that will continue to keep me motivated, even in days where it's like, I might give myself a pass.
Oh my goodness. I can't even rely on motivation. In fact, my Instagram handle is Amberlys Lago Motivation. And the only reason it's Amberlys Lago Motivation instead of just Amberlys Lago is my daughter had opened up some Instagram handle for me that said Amberlys Lago. And so that one was taken. So I was like, well, what can I call myself? And that was, years ago. And I'm like, okay, it was so new to me. I barely knew how to work it. But, people think, oh, you're so motivated. And I'm not always motivated. I can't tell you how many days I will drive to the gym and I'll sit in the car and I'll be scrolling, and I'm like, dude, I've learned to talk to myself instead of listen to myself. Like I have to talk to myself and say, Amberly, you got to get in there, do this. You're going to feel so much better when you're done. But I have learned to rely on healthy habits instead of motivation or willpower. Because let me tell you, my willpower will go out the window if I'm too lonely, too hungry, too tired, or whatever, any of those. I'm like, I will eat the cake on the counter. I will eat the queso and chips. I'm here in Texas. There's queso and chips everywhere. It's like a thing. I need queso and chips anonymous. It's bad. And so it's like relying on those healthy habits instead of motivation. Yeah. But, and the thing is, people say, oh, you're motivated. And it's like, no, I'm not really. But I ask myself why it is. Why am I doing what I remember my why, and that gets me through any hows. But also I think about no matter how hard it is, or no matter if I hit a wall or hit a rock bottom or fall or fail, I always remind myself that anything is better. Where I am and where I'm going is better than where I was. And that keeps me moving forward.
That's so good. And someone I know you're well connected with, Ed Milet, talks about that all the time, right? I'm not the most motivated person, right? There's a lot of days where I just don't want to do it, but I have something that keeps me going for that purpose, right? To your point, I know what could happen or where I could end up if I don't do this. So I've got that motivating factor. Now, with your story, like you mentioned, you get through these surgeries and people are telling you, gosh, I don't know if you're going to walk again. I don't know if you're going to be able to save your leg. The leg gets saved. But you develop this pain that happens. And so to numb some of the pain, all of a sudden having a glass of wine or a couple glasses of wine becomes a part of life. And a lot of people don't think, oh, that's overly odd, right? That's a normal way to cope with certain pains. Mm-hmm. But it becomes a bigger part of your life.
Well, Phil, let me tell you, it was like sometimes a bottle of wine.
Yeah.
It turned into that. It was like, it was crazy because I was never the party girl. I mean, I knew how to have a good time. And give me some tequila and I'd be on the tabletop dancing. Like, you know what I mean? It's like it could be pretty fun. But I started when I started trying all these different treatments. I mean, I had $2.9 million worth of medical expenses. We had a lien on our house. It was tough times. I was just doing my best to push down, push through, do everything to get through the pain.
Yeah.
And trying all these different treatments. At one time, I was on 73 homeopathic pills and 11 different prescription medications. Just all these medications. I don't even know what some of them were. I was just like, okay. And they're like, and one day, and I was having invasive procedures too, like, spinal stimulator, spinal radio frequency, which they didn't tell me the first time I had it, the side effect, you could be paralyzed. And so I chose to not have it the second time when they said, well, they did go over the side effects, right? And so, I mean, I was so willing to I was desperate. And I remember having a glass of wine and going, oh, wow, why didn't the doctor just tell me to have a glass of wine? That kind of numbs the pain out a little bit. And then 2, a little bit better. 3, I'm plastered. Well, I started drinking every day. And I remember thinking, this isn't the healthiest thing to do, but if this is what I have to do to get through the pain, then nothing else works. I guess this is what I'm going to have to do. And before long, it was like by 2:00, the pain would be so bad. I would be like, okay, I've got to make it through the day long enough to pick my daughter up from school and get home so I can knock one back as quick as I can. And I'm not talking about, there was nothing pretty about it. There was nothing romantical about it. It was like, let me knock it, just, and I was hiding it though. I was hiding it from anyone. I started really shutting the world out. And when I say hiding it, it was a skill to hide it when you're married to a cop. Like, he's like, let me see your eyes. And I'm like, I'm fine. No, I haven't been drinking. It was terrible. It was like I was living this double life where I was trying to pretend like everything was okay. But on the inside, I was just dying inside. And that led me really down a road of deep, deep depression where just about all the light that was left in me was about gone. And I was to the point where I was like, I really don't want to live anymore, but I'm too afraid to die. And I was having thoughts like, my husband could find another wife. He could find another mom for them. And I was having those thoughts. And then I just started praying. I asked God for help, and I really think that by the grace of God, it gave me the courage to ask one of my clients who I knew that was in recovery if she could take me to like a 12-step meeting. That which was just, again, shame. The shame. I used to be her fitness trainer, and I'm like, I got a drinking problem now. Can you help me? But by like I said, by the grace of God, I didn't feel so alone. I went to my first meeting and no kidding you, like I was scared to death. Like this was so scary to me, scarier than preparing for any surgery actually was the shame I had walking into a room and having to say I was an alcoholic. And I remember there was a women's meeting and I just watched all these women going in. And I was like, well, that must be the place where I'm supposed to go. And I never heard back from that client, and a week went by and I was like, I need to get some help right now or I don't think I'm going to live. And so I actually Googled recovery and 12-step and I found a place. And so I only share that. So if you ask for help and you don't get it, sometimes people get busy or they just can't help. And you just got to be willing to think out of the box and willing to start digging, like my grandfather said, start digging. And so I go to this meeting and I sit between a nun and a cowgirl. I'm like, where the hell am I? Like a nun and a cowgirl? What kind of a meeting is this? But anyway, people started sharing, and what I heard was hope. And what I heard was people share my story, although a little bit different, it was still the same. And
Wow.
I saw the light in these women's eyes, and I heard God through them and what they shared. And I just kept going back. And that was 2016 when I got sober. And it changed my life.
Yeah. So, as you talk through the different events in your life, I think that topic of, shame and guilt is a tough one, right? Because it's personal, but it also oftentimes maybe there's that insecurity of what are people going to think about this if they know, right? But oftentimes to get to a point of help and moving past it, you have to become vulnerable and transparent that there is something going on, right? Whether that was early on with sexually traumatic incidences, whether that's, hey, I need help just getting up out of bed, right? If that's, after the surgeries, that's help after, I've started to drink. Now I feel like I can't break this by myself. So what for you has been the catalyst, and maybe it's now reflecting on it, but it just allows you to say, you know what, for me to live the best possible version of my life, I need to be transparent and ask for help.
Well, I think that's what changes your life. But I think that being an acceptance for where you are on your journey, and I mean radical acceptance and awareness, because I was in denial. And that's one of the reasons that the drinking kind of helped at first, because I was like, it just helped me try to stuff or forget those feelings until I woke up the next morning and it all was back, but worse, because I had guilt on top and shame about drinking on top of it. So it just started to get worse and worse and worse and pile up and pile up. And
Yeah.
I think that when you are in acceptance, that was hard for me, but when you're in acceptance and you can start to take a good hard look at your life, is when you can take those next best steps and start to seek the help that you need. But I had a lot of shame about, having a drinking problem and being an alcoholic. And I remember going to my husband and saying, "Hey, I think I have a problem." He's like, "Oh, no, you don't have a problem." Anybody that had as much pain and who's been through as much as you have would be doing exactly what you're doing. And I'm like, but deep down inside, I knew that I had a problem. And I think that's what you have to ask yourself. Like, your truth, and only God and you, well, I say God, whatever you believe, universe, spirit, but your truth. And when you can accept that is when you can start to make the best decisions. But also when you own your story, you heal what you reveal. And I said that before, but it's like, I did not want to own, I didn't want to be in acceptance or share or talk about any of the stuff. But then once you own it, it's like people can't use it against you. You know what I mean? It's like I used to be so embarrassed, and not even just embarrassed, but I used to like hate all my scars. Look at myself with disgust. I hated the way I looked. And I would always do things to try to cover it up. I didn't want anybody to know that that I had CRPS. And I remember when my daughter started a new school, I was still on crutches, but I remember trying to walk to pick her up without crutches and trying to walk without a limp. I just did not want none of the moms to know that anything, that I'd been hit by a car or that I had CRPS or that anything was wrong. I guess I was like, I don't want anybody to pity me. Don't pity me. You know? But it was also really on my part, it was like kind of selfish. Like, it was like shutting people out and not even letting them have the opportunity to help or get close to me. Because when we share our vulnerability, we do build these meaningful connections and we allow other people to see themselves in what we've gone through, And so I've made some incredible connections with with people who are like, wow, I thought I was the only one, or I'm glad I'm not the only one that's going through this. Like, you struggle with this too. And I've had people that have reached out to me and they're like, thank you for sharing what you shared. Like, there's been times where, I'm given a keynote and it comes out. Like, I don't share my sobriety story a whole lot. Like, sometimes it just comes out naturally. And I'm like, ooh, that was a business event. I'm not sure I should have shared that sobriety thing. Maybe that wasn't a good call. Like, me in my head, right? Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Those are the times I get the most like emails, direct messages, people saying, and then it hit me. A couple of months ago, I was speaking at this mastermind, and this girl pops on, and they said, "Do you have any questions?" And this young girl pops up. And she says, "Yeah, hey, Amberly," and she told me her name. She said, "I just want to say, because of you, I have 3 months sober. I heard you speak, and you had shared that you stopped drinking, and it gave me the courage to try one day at a time to stop. And so far, it's been 3 months." And I was like, "Oh, wow, that touched my heart,
Yeah. So there's no doubt that the amount of stories that are happening because of your mission now, between writing the book, your podcast, your TEDx, your, being able to show up on the Today Show and share your story, there's no doubt that continues to help people. Talk about just, I don't know, I think the term fulfillment might be a good one. How fulfilling it is to be able to say, I had all of these crappy, horrific things happen in my life, but I'm now able to use them to help others who have either been through something similar or those same types of situations. And we're moving people to be able to live a fulfilled life, and one that's filled with joy.
Well, you know what? I think, after my accident, when I was like, oh, okay, I was really trying to get back into the fitness, stuff. And I believe my career boomed at first, to my surprise. I was thinking nobody would want to work out with me because I felt so broken. I was like, who's going to want, I used to train people how to pace themselves for marathons and hold mitts for people who were training to be cops and in the CHP. And I mean, I used to be like this really tough trainer, and now I'm like hobbling around. Like, who's going to want to train with me? To my surprise, my career boomed because people saw me in my wheelchair and on crutches. But then when I was like, I am just killing myself, I really stopped to ask myself, well, what can I do that would still be fulfilling? And so I thought about, okay, well, what brings me joy? And I love people. And I'm like, well, how can I still work with people though? How can I help them? And so that's how I got into the coaching. And I think that, I had somebody ask me the other day. So I run a mastermind. It's called Unstoppable Life Mastermind. And I had someone in my mastermind say, when you do your speaking, are you doing it mostly to sell your courses or for the money? And I said, neither. That's not why I got into speaking at all. Like, at all. Yeah. I'm not one of these that sell from stage. I said, I didn't get in it for the money. I got in it because I love people and I want to give hope and spark some joy, maybe a little laughter, maybe, and some inspiration, and give some tangible tools to others, because I felt so alone on my journey when I was going through the darkest moments of my life. And I don't want anybody else to ever feel like that. I want people to know that they are not alone in their pain. And when you can do something fulfilling, when you can do something that you love for other people. And I remember when I was going to give my first talk, I was so nervous. I was going to speak to a bunch of financial advisors, realtors, and mortgage people. I'm like, I don't know why they're having me speak to this group, but okay. So I bought a suit, didn't own a suit. I had workout clothes. And so I bought a suit, thought that's what I should wear to something like this. And on the way there, my dad calls and it's like, oh, I'm so nervous. I'm about to go do this talk. And he goes, you're doing public speaking. He goes, are you crazy? Don't you know that's the number 2 fear besides death itself? And I'm like, thanks, Dad. And he goes, well, hey, just remember, this isn't about you. This is about the people you serve. And wow. I think that's what it's all about. Like when you do something you love, you're going to be successful at it because you're going to build that grit. So if you're listening today and you're like, well, I don't really feel fulfilled. Well, I would really encourage you to think about what your vision is, not what somebody said, oh, you should do this, or you'd be really good at this. Or like, I have one of my best friends, she's a realtor and she's good. And she's like, I'm good at it. She goes, I don't know if I ever would have been a realtor had my husband not said, you should be a realtor. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I think stubbornness has been kind of good for me because I'm kind of stubborn, and that kind of helps keep your grit going. But for sure. But I think that when you put a lot of love and care into it, when you have that vision and you're crystal clear on what it is that you really want, and despite the naysayers and despite people who are like, oh, now that's just too big of a dream, or you'll never get there. Let that motivate you. Let that be your motivation. Yeah. Like that spark, you're like, oh yeah, well, I'm going to prove it to myself that I can do that. That has always been motivating to me when somebody says, oh, silly girl, or, I'm like, oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amberly, well, I want to say thank you so much for highlighting the pivotal moments in your life. I mean, just the sheer amount of grit that you have shown to overcome all the obstacles that have been set before you, but the grace you've shown yourself along the way is just amazing. And it's going to be fun to continue to watch your story and how you continue to just impact so many. So I want to say thank you so much for being on, and can't wait we're going to have to do this again when book number 2 comes out, or whatever it is, when the movie about your life comes out.
You are so incredible. Oh my goodness. You are so good at what you do.
Well, thank you.
And
I
so
appreciate
fun
you
to hang
on.
out. But you know what? I knew it was going to be fun from the moment I logged on and I heard you talking. I was like, oh yeah, we're going to have a good time.
Oh.
Yeah. So thank you. And thank you for letting me share with your incredible audience. I know they love your show as much as I do. So thank you.